I once had a boss who was hilariously mean. At the time, I didn't find it hilarious, but the major takeaway from it, some 12 years later, is I can't tell the stories of how mean he was with a straight face. They were like cartoon character levels of mean. And I legit thought this dude hated me and could never understand why he wouldn't fire me. It just turned out this is just how he related to people he worked with. Some examples that stick with me. One of my favorite ones is you'd work really hard on something, and you'd have this stack of printouts of creative presentations for concepts, so like one sheet per concept. So you'd get to his desk, and like I was terrified of him, so you'd always meet with him with overkill, like too much work, because you were so afraid of the reactions. And he would take the decks, he wouldn't let you present them, he would just grab them and kind of go one at a time and toss them to the side. And then it's like you'd get through like 5 or 6 of them, which is a lot of work. And you've been desperately trying to come up with something good. And he'd get through the whole stack, and then he'd say, "Anything else?" And then you'd be like, "No, that's the presentation." And then he would sigh. And then he'd grab the decks and be like, "All right, explain these to me." So that was one of my favorite ones. Once I asked him, I was open. I'd finished up my work and had nothing to do. And I thought the proactive thing to do was to just say, "Hey, I'm open right now. Is there anything I could do?" And he said something to the effect of, "Don't you think I know that you have nothing to do?" And so I never asked ever again when I had something to do. If I had nothing to do, I used to just go for really long walks or go in the library for like hours, because it was better than that reaction. God, there's so much more, but those two, they kind of cover it the best. It's like no matter what you tried to do, you just couldn't please this guy. And there was not going to be any reasoning with him. You know, like when you're fundamentally wired to just have no tolerance for the people around you and view them as essentially malfunctioning hands for your brain, it's not a lot that's going to happen. So it was overwhelming. Because of that, all the projects went terribly. They all dragged. Every day was like this nightmare of trying to figure out just what it was that this dude wanted, and to see if you could do it in a way that wasn't going to lead to some remark that either made you want to go punch a wall or cry. Because of that, I think it was a very kind of overwhelming time. It was really hard not to take work home with me, in terms of that kind of emotional baggage. And I didn't really come out of it financially on top, because like I just maybe I went to the gym a little bit. I think I stopped going to the gym at this point. I took like 10 coffee breaks a day. So all I did was just consume coffee and alcohol and pizza and just try to sort of get through the bullshit of the day, which was the total wrong response to such a situation. So this video is about what to do if you think your boss hates you. Because there's one thing to hate your boss, but it is a totally different thing when you actually think your boss hates you and won't fire you. And I used to pray that this dude would fire me, because then I could sort of pass the buck on that level of responsibility. I wouldn't have to handle it, because he would sort of make the decision for me, because I was so kind of overwhelmed. I had no fucking clue what to do with my life, almost. And the big sort of lesson is like, when it starts to feel like work is your entire life and you don't really know what to do, then your best bet is to sort of get all your ducks in a row. What's up, Jillian? To get all your ducks in a row, and I don't mean that in a sort of ridiculous negative way, because obviously you can't get ducks in a row, but is that the more overwhelming your job situation is, the more likely you are to sort of disappear down a kind of hole of shutting people out, not taking care of yourself, being overly indulgent, whether that's in like TV or food or alcohol or whatever, weed, whatever it is. The more sort of overwhelmed you are, the more likely you are to kind of shut down, and you have to do the complete and total opposite of that. Like the first step, because you have to find a new job, but when you're not mentally healthy, I don't know how, I mean, you can find one, but a lot of times you're so sort of beat down by the situation that you actually kind of think like you'll never find one, because like you must be terrible, because all you do is piss off some high profile person in a high profile gig, at least for what you think about life at the age of 27 or whatever. So the task then is to figure out immediately how to get happy. And you can't blame the job for you not being happy. The job has a shitload to do with it, but ultimately like, you have to take the steps that are going to make you happy. And so that's like a personal thing. You know, some of it is really obvious. Eat better. Maybe don't consume caffeine all day. Maybe don't drink heavily. Go for walks or whatever. But then some of that is just less obvious. Like, what are the things that you're neglecting as a kind of side effect of your shitty job, you know? The things that you should be doing, whether it's like making art or going clubbing or going to shows or whatever. You know, where is this thing tearing your life apart? And like, you got to re-grab those things, because you can't blame the job for those things. Like, that shit happened on your watch. The job is making it harder, but you got to kind of go in and take back those aspects of your life. So that's kind of like, I mean, the short gist of it is, when the job is stealing all your joy, you got to steal the joy back and kind of set those boundaries and reclaim it. And the thing that will happen is, like, once you do that, the job becomes more tolerable. It's just harder to fuck up the life of a happy person. It's really easy to fuck up the life of an unhappy person. It doesn't take much more than a dirty look in the morning to make a deeply unhappy person have an awful day. But it's a lot harder to get at a person who's built up their kind of emotional ecosystem to where they can handle the bullshit of passive aggressive nonsense or just like a shitty gig or whatever. And at the same time, so we'll like extend this video by a minute. The other thing is interview for everything. Interview for every job related to what you do. Interview for everything that you're mildly qualified to do. Maybe you're going to discover that it might suck for a while to take 2 jobs, but that maybe they're 2 jobs that kick ass. You know, maybe you secretly rediscover how much you love coffee and shoes, and you work at Foot Locker full time, and you pick up shifts at Starbucks, and that's going to be physically somewhat taxing, but it's not going to be as emotionally taxing. So, you know, interview for everything, and like, because that's how you create your own luck. And then the other thing is just shut down some spending so that you have some leverage. This was like I think one of my bigger mistakes when I had that job was I was making more money than I'd ever made. I wished I had lived like a monk during that time so that I could come out of it with a nice chunk of change in the bank, but I really didn't, and that kind of cut down on the leverage I had. So make yourself happy, cut down on whatever spending you can. You know, as Gary Vee would say, don't be fancy, and start interviewing for everything. And don't worry about whether it's beneath you. Don't worry about whether it pays less. Don't worry about whether you're qualified. Just make sure that's like you believe that you could do the job. If you believe you could do it, go and apply for it. That's gonna help create your own luck. And like when you start to have job interviews and they go well, it's gonna be super easy to walk into that shady situation and just not give two fucks what that person thinks about you. All right, thanks a lot for watching.